Good evening, everybody. My name is Eva from SocaMom.com, and tonight we are doing book club again. I know you haven't seen us in a while, but we're back. I know you see all the lovely, familiar faces, so everybody say hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So tonight we are talking to Miss Dionne. Tell me how to say your last name properly. I want to get it right.
It's Peart.
Peart. Okay.
Right.
Didn't it sounds exactly how it's spelled, and and we are talking about her book Somerset Grove. Everybody got a chance to get a copy of it, so thank you very much for providing that for us.
Oh, thank
And
you.
we also got a special gift with it. I know everyone's going to be jealous, but everybody was very excited to get the tamarind balls. I had to share them. I don't know if anybody else just kind of went in the corner and ate them, but I ended up having to share mine.
Yeah, my daughter took mine.
But
and ate half
man, mine were hunting me down when
I didn't even get to smell it.
Man, I opened the package and the kids were right there waiting for me. So, Dionne, go ahead and introduce yourself and your book, and then we're going to get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And by the way, thank you for the wonderful trailer. That was just awesome. So we'll be posting that all over the place. But so my name is Dionne Peart. I am an attorney living in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Canada, but I was born in England to Jamaican parents. And my first book here is Somerset Grove. You see it? And it is a story about a family of 3 generations of Jamaican women that go through a number of different. I'm sorry, that's Dawn. A number of different trials as they try to live the life that they all imagine for themselves. And so it is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you can also link to it on my website at dionnepeart.com.
Awesome. Okay, so my first question for the night is, what inspired you to write this book? Because you're an attorney, which means you're probably super busy.
Yes.
And what inspired you to write a novel on top of everything else you have to do?
Well, you know, I think when I was younger, I always loved to read, but I never knew any authors that looked like me. Winnipeg was very diverse, but very diverse with small numbers of people. So there were a lot of different Caribbean groups, but not a lot of different people in those groups. So I never saw many people that looked like me, never knew about any authors that looked like me. So I just never thought about, you know, becoming a writer when I was younger. I just loved to read. But I think around my 6th year of practice, I'd gotten out of reading for enjoyment and was just reading case law and memos and briefs and stuff. And so, but around my 6th year of practice, I got back into reading for pleasure. And then I thought, you know, I would love to write a book. I wonder what it'd be like for me to do that. And once I started, it would just seem so natural for me. So it was, I just started doing it every morning. I would wake up an hour, at least 30 minutes to an hour ahead of time, and I would write every day before I started my day at work. And from there, it took me 2.5 years, but you know, now I do it every day. I can't imagine not writing.
Oh, wow. That's wow. So you got up so were there some mornings that you were just like, I can't do it, or was it you were just pretty much driven? Which way did it go? Or was it somewhere in the middle?
Most mornings, I'd say like 90% of the time, I got up and I wrote. The only times that I didn't write was if I had to catch an early flight, or if I had a hearing that day and I had to, you know, just focus strictly on preparing for that hearing. then I wouldn't get to write, but I'd feel guilty about it until the next day when I actually got back on my computer. So I was surprised at myself, but I was really consistent. So every morning and on the weekends I would get up and do, on the weekends I would do maybe 4 hours a day, but
Wow.
every day. Yeah.
That's great.
Wow. Okay, so ladies, get into it. Get started. You can start in on the book. You can start in on, hopefully we can get some careers, dual career advice from you. And so I know the ladies have some questions prepared. You all can get started.
I'd like to ask, this is Alicia from Rewind and Come Again. How did you decide to choose this time frame for where the story takes place? Because you chose in the 80s, the 90s. Why did you go back into the 60s and 70s and even a little earlier with the grandmother?
Yeah, growing up, I always, my parents would tell me stories about when they were growing up, but I never really got, when I thought about it, I really didn't have that much detail. They would tell me bits and pieces, and I could kind of weave a story together or a timeline together, but I never really got to know what it was like for my parents growing up. And so this novel actually helped me to get to know them better, because I would interrogate them all the time doing my research. I would call them up and say, you know, when you were planning to leave Jamaica and you were going to England, how did you get there? Was it ship? Was it, did you get there by plane? Which airport was it? Airport's no longer there anymore. It was Palisados. And so it was a way for me to get to know my parents. And I always thought that I wanted to do a multi-generational novel. I just love those types of stories, and so it just fit. I could use my parents for research, and then kind of weave the story of these three women together.
This is Trisha Dionne from Crave Culture Events. Hi. I related to the story a lot because I was born in Guyana, but I grew up in England, and I've been in the US now for about 10 years, but all my family is in England. My parents are there, and I found a lot of these characters had a lot of regret in terms of not staying closer together, especially when they were separated from each other. And I was thinking about myself in terms of my family being so far away and not always staying in touch the way that I want to. So what inspired you with these characters? Did you have an experience like that where you had maybe parents or grandparents in another country and trying to keep that bond going when you're so far apart?
That's a good question. Two things. So my nuclear family is very small. It's just me and my brother and my parents. And my parents, after they left England, moved to Canada. And so it was just the four of us. We didn't have any other relatives in the country. My parents didn't, they didn't get to travel to Jamaica that much. So it was really just correspondence, letters, home to catch up and keep in touch with their parents. So that was one thing. Another thing was that I was a first-generation Canadian, and a lot of my friends were first-generation Canadians, and they had a lot of interesting stories. And when you'd hear bits and pieces of it, but you wouldn't get the full story. So I had a friend who's from St. Vincent, and she was in Canada, but her mother and her sister were in the States, and her dad was back home. And so there was a lot of stories like that where these families were separated. You didn't get the full story about why they were separated, and because we're very private, we don't really pry, but there's a lot of people with that kind of story, and I always thought that was interesting, the way that they had were in different countries, and they were spread apart, and they weren't really close. You weren't sure what the story was, but you knew that there was a story there.
This is Carol from Caribbean Reads. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we
Hi.
can hear you. Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry I was late. I
Hi.
had a question for you, and
Mhm.
I think you've answered a little bit along the way, but you did say that you interviewed your parents and you got a lot of information, some of the background information from them. And I know a
Mhm.
lot of times when we write these stories, especially first novels, and there's lots of little bits of truth in them. We get some pushback from relatives, or
Mhm.
people who may have read it about, oh, even if the character has absolutely nothing to do with them. They're like, oh, I think you're writing about me there. I don't want to be
Yes.
in. Did you encounter that? Did you have to, how did you deal with that if you did encounter it?
um, yeah, I did in a humorous way. So people would say, "Did you model that character after me?" Kind of joking, and I would say, no. Actually, some of the characters are based or modeled after people that I knew that weren't from the Caribbean, but had similar stories. So I had friends from the Middle East that kind of had similar stories to that, and friends from Uganda kind of had the same story. Um, so I didn't get too much pushback. Somerset Grove is a fictional town, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want anyone to say, that's not how we are in our town.
All right.
That would happen here. Yeah, it would happen, but I don't want, I don't want people complaining that I kind of, talk badly about their hometown. So that's why I made up a fictional town.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm Elle from Cleverly Changing, and I
Hi.
was wondering, did this story, the whole thing kind of come to you from beginning to end, or as you were writing, you decided to come up with new thoughts, come up with, let's say, the ending, or did you already know where you wanted to go when you started?
Good question. No, I didn't know where I was going with it. I just knew that I wanted to write a multi-generational story. So I knew that there were going to be three main characters, and Angelique's story came to me first. So, and actually, the first line of the story came to me right away, and I just started building from there. And I got about two-thirds of the way through the book, and so I'd gotten into Carmen's story. And then I said, it's kind of late to introduce another character. But Ruby was in the background screaming, my story needs to be told. You need to show my version of the story. So I actually went back to the beginning and kind of weaved her into the book. And she actually turned out to be one of my favorite characters because you get a better understanding of who she is and why she did the things she did and why she treated Angelique the way that she did, because you got a little bit of her story. So I didn't know until about two-thirds of the way through that Ruby would be such a prominent character. And then, the last third of the story where, things get a little bit harried, I decided at some point someone's going to have to suffer a tragedy for me to make this really, really juicy. So then it was a matter of, who is going to be the one, and so that's how that kind of unfolded.
Okay.
This
So
is
how,
Jay.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, who's talking?
No, go
I can
ahead.
wait.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm still tweeting. Enjoy. Go ahead.
This is Jay.
Hi, Jay.
Thank you so very much for, your great effort in this book. A lot of the
Oh, thank you.
characters seemed very familiar to me as a Caribbean woman that grew up on the island and immigrated here. And, a lot of the storylines and a lot of the themes I'm quite familiar with. I think probably before, I guess in previous questions earlier, we were trying to find out, did any one of these characters, have any real connection to you? Like, was grandma really connected, or is Angelique someone that you knew? But outside of that, I just want to make a comment before I had a question.
Okay.
I see in this book very strongly how generational curses
Yes.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in that same vein, I see how mental health issues are passed down generationally.
Mhm.
Because grandma was hurt, she takes it out on her daughter, and that daughter now has to carry the hurt of grandma and takes it out on her kid. And it's something that really resonated a lot with me personally, because I realized this is something that happens a lot in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
With that said, in writing this book and in that theme, is that something that you purposely wanted to highlight, or did it just happen to come about in just writing this story? Like, did you set out to to put focus on these generational not so good things
Mhm.
that are being passed on after, from daughter to daughter to daughter? It's just that stood out to me most.
Mhm. That's a good observation. It kind of happened organically. Um, yeah, it's a great observation. Hurt people, and um, people that experience trauma pass it on to others. They don't really heal, and I think I'd say for a lot of people in the Caribbean, we kind of keep the curtains closed on what's going on in our lives. So we just deal with it, and we think we're doing the right thing by um, focusing on what people can see on the outside and not necessarily dealing with what's going on the inside. But it has a way of affecting our children and the way our children relate to us. There's always sometimes there's this kind of this little wall, and there's this area of topics that you don't touch. You don't dig too deep. So it did come about organically, but to have a story where there's conflict between them, I had to go there where we don't deal with our hurt, we just kind of pass it on, and it just kind of it just manifested in the way that they treated each other.
But I thought it was interesting, though, that what I saw was at the end that I don't know if it's because her the last generation living in a different world, a modern world, but you kind of got the feeling that maybe things were going to change, um, possibly not intentionally, but she goes out. Well, I don't want to spoil, but she goes out with the guy. She doesn't. She finishes college. She doesn't get knocked up. She
Mhm.
she's kind of looks like she's going on a different path from her mom and her grandmother, and
Mhm.
so we kind of see that there's maybe a little salvation in the future for the lineage. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the way I looked at it. That yes, all of that was there, and the hurt was being passed on, but maybe there's hope. She has a strong friend in on her
Mhm.
side, and good
Mhm.
influences, and that she was
Mhm.
going to be okay. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
My observation is in line with Jay's because I see it. Iyanla Van Zandt says patterns and pathology, which is basically what carried on through the entire thing. But it also, the beginning, in the middle of the story, we got to see that their challenges, the struggles, the real fight was within themselves. They all had dreams deferred. And
Mhm.
because of these dreams deferred, they they were trying to find themselves or reinvent themselves or reawaken themselves in different ways,
Mhm.
or settling, so
Right.
Angelique was always looking, and
Yeah.
and Carmen was, they were always looking to each other for whys, and so there was always this hole. And I kept thinking, I'm like, how many of us is this the immigrant story? Dreams
Mhm.
deferred, we're here, we are disconnected, we're trying to connect, but there's this discomfort that we don't address as, traditional Caribbean folks, that we don't
Mhm.
cry, we don't, you
mm.
know,
Right.
grown
Right.
people business, leave it, and, all that good stuff. It's just like, whoa, this is just a story. So that's what I appreciate.
I think that for me, I really wanted to see some kind of reconciliation for Carmen, because she almost got even. And let me just back up a little bit. Even outside of the three main characters, you saw the other grandmother, the paternal grandmother's own, you know, being deferred or whatever story she wanted to create.
Her issues.
Yes, yes. So for me, I think I wanted to see some. Ideally, I wanted to see what the story would have been like for Carmen and her dad towards the end. I think that's like, you know, she still has grandma and grandpa, but there's a story now that her father wanted to reconnect. So what was that about, you know? So for me,
So, do we hear a sequel here?
yes.
I know. That is so funny you say that, because a lot of people have asked me if I was, a lot of people asked me, are you going to write a sequel? And I hadn't planned to when I finished the book. I was done, and I had, you know, I have, I think, 5 other books in various stages. And, but I think I will do a sequel to it, because a lot of people want to know what happened with Carmen and her father. And a lot of people want to know what happened with the men. So kind of like the Brewster Place, the women of Brewster Place, they want to find out what happened with the men. And so I thought, well, maybe it'll be interesting to find out, because there's, you know, there's questions about, you know, Byron is almost too good to be true, and, you know, was there any manipulation on his part? Did he take advantage of someone that was just, you know, in a bad place? You know, and the same with Clifton. Everyone's hoping that.
Don't mess with my boy.
No.
They are
good Caribbean men.
I know a couple Byrons.
I think so.
They are invested. This is a trip.
Love it.
Happy that you guys brought up Byron, though, because in regards to Carmen's story, right? A lot of the times you hear, oh, you didn't have a father, you were fatherless, you got daddy issues, this is why you go searching after men, right? She grew up in a household with her mom and her dad and her brother, right? She had that nuclear structure, yet she was not satisfied enough within herself and kept looking outwardly, specifically searching for whatever it was in men continuously, in and out of relationships, ignoring her child, right? That Carmen's storyline really stuck out to me, and I hope you do a sequel, because I would love to hear more of Carmen, Angelique's story a little bit deeper. But I was wondering, just out loud, like, okay, she didn't have daddy issues. Her daddy was a great guy, right? So was it because her mom, you know, like, you know, you have to look at it differently. All the time you want to say you have daddy issues, so you go looking for men. Maybe if you have mommy issues, you do the same thing too. Is it like that? So somebody help me understand.
I definitely saw it that way. Yeah.
Somebody help me.
For me, I think it was part of also the time, because Byron was my great-grandfather. So my great-grandmother had a child before she met my great-grandfather. And it was the time, I think it's a time when, you know, you had to have a husband or something, and you felt like as a woman, your success was tied to a man. So in order to get social status and all of that stuff, you needed a man. And Angelique, I think, realized too late that she didn't need a man to get what she needed. She was able to get that on her own. It's just she was on this wheel, and I think she realized way too late that she did not need another man to get her, or any man to get her where she wanted to go, because she was able to do that on her own. But I definitely saw that it wasn't a daddy issue, but I also recognized that it was the time in which the story started, where there was this, especially in the Caribbean, the man did this to get status. You had to be with the man and all of this. So that's how I saw that part of it.
For me, I saw that it wasn't necessarily that she had daddy issues. It was more that she had a need for love. because she wasn't getting the love that she needed from her mother, which, you know, normally we need that sort of comfort, that sort of nurturing. And although her dad was a great dad, he was a provider, not necessarily a nurturer. And so I saw her in her relationships as a need and a want for getting nurturing that she didn't receive from her mother, which kind of caused her to act out, so to speak. And so it was more of she was searching for love. And I don't know, that's just how I read it, where she just wanted some comfort and that peace that she didn't get growing up.
You know what's interesting too, you know, going back to the pattern, I think that started with Ruby because her mother clearly was very committed to her. Her mother, you know, stood by her when her dad died, and, you know, when she met Byron, and, you know, Ruby felt like, you know what, you don't need me anymore, I'll go back to Panama. So I'm not sure where Ruby took that up. I think Ruby was really heartbroken from that very first instance. And from there, it just was this domino effect. And maybe she resented her mom for not being as sympathetic. I don't know. But that was very interesting to me.
I found that mother-daughter relationship very typical old school Caribbean.
Yeah.
Like I'm reading the book and I'm like yelling at them at the same time because I'm like, can't you see the pattern repeating itself over and over again where that you know the mother loves the daughter, you know she wants the best for her, but she feels she has to protect her from herself as she grows older, so she must be harsher. Like there was a line that said, the older she got, the more she felt she had to control her or something like that. And I felt like it's like, and I've seen this in my own life and in family and friends where the son can run around and do whatever he wants.
Right.
But the daughter, you have to protect her.
Yeah.
You have to protect her. But the way you protect her is by being harsh and by controlling her movements and not showing love.
Yeah.
You know, like, because she would say things, and I'm like, that's really not necessary to speak to her that way, but she thought she was protecting her by being harsh.
Yeah.
And to me, that's very typical old school Caribbean way to raise
gosh.
Yeah. Mothers love their sons and raise their daughters.
Right. They just it's almost like you're getting punished for being a girl, but you know, it's like I'm preparing you to continue to be punished by everybody else. Like,
well, because when a girl falls, quote unquote falls, her fall is so much more obvious and shameful than a boy's fall.
Right.
You know what's funny? I think if you were to have this same chat with a group of ladies actually in the Caribbean, the perspectives and the questions would definitely be different. Because when you come to America, and again, I'm speaking as an immigrant, you want to assimilate, and two, your eyes are widened to a lot more experiences and being a lot more tolerant and being a lot more patient that you would not have being in the Caribbean because of a lot of stigma and taboo that still exists, right? So even in regards to, you know, what Elisa was saying, like back home, like that's normal, right? Here, our girls are treated is that normal? It's normal.
I heard that.
Our girls are treated like girls because we want to make sure they don't experience what we experience Caribbean women, especially like in regards to that's something that's rampant still to this day. One thing that stood out to me in the book in regards to relationships is that typical grandmother, West Indian grandmother, she don't do right by the daughter, but she does right by the granddaughter.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
well, you got to make up for something. You got to fix it. She got to get to heaven some kind of way.
That was my grandmother. Like I saw in Ruby, I saw my grandmother. Like without a doubt.
That's your second chance.
Yeah.
So, Dionne, how much of this did you take into account when you were creating these characters? Like, how much of this can you say that you either experienced yourself or, you know, you said that you talked to other people from other immigrant communities. Do you think it's just an immigrant thing, or is it something that is special from Jamaica or from the Caribbean as a whole? How did you kind of weave all of that in? Where did it come from?
Um, not necessarily a Caribbean thing, but I think a lot of different ethnic groups are similar like that. Like I had a lot of friends that were East Indian, Asian, East Asian, South Asian, same kind of thing. I had a friend that was Sikh, and when you start basically when you hit puberty, when you're Sikh and you're a girl, you cannot step foot outside the house except to go to school. Like not even to take the trash outside. She was not allowed out of the house. And but the boys were, allowed to do whatever they wanted to. So and it was the same thing that she was just raised to be a good Sikh girl and not I didn't feel that she had that kind of affection and love that kids in America and Canada, the kind of relationships that they have with their parents. There was never this thing where you were best friends with your mom or you could go to your mom and tell them anything. I never had that experience.
Nope.
And I just find it strange when I see it. Still to this day, I find it strange when I see it with my other friends now that they can tell their mom anything, and there's no way that I would tell my mother some of the things that that they talk about. So, and then to see my parents with my brother has daughters, and just seeing them, my mom wants to get one granddaughter a car, and the other one can run through the house with her shoes on, where I would have been like murdered if
laid out. I can't even. I get scared just thinking about it. Like my kids went to go see my mom the other day, and I'm like, oh, so they don't have to take their shoes off. Oh, they can just go in your cab.
Right.
You're not gonna say anything. Oh, they can just take what they. Okay.
Right. Right. So yeah, they get their second chance, and you totally missed it.
I think in addition to that, I think the immigrant story, and it has to be an immigrant story. We don't foster the right relationships from the start, so we just kind of continue this thing. But for me, when I came here from Jamaica as a teenager, my mom had no choice but to give me more freedom, because as an immigrant, you now have to work. You grew up in the Caribbean where you had Miss Vi, Miss Susie across the street, everybody looking out for you, to now becoming latchkey kids.
Yes.
And having to now loosen a little bit, but still have that threat, don't bother do this and don't bother to do that, but they have to adjust. They have to adjust, but it's still a struggle for them, because for them in their head, oh, this is how Aunt Edna raised me, so it's good for me, it's good for you. But in the American culture, it's different. And I mean, to this day, my mother tell my friends that she's a dragon and spit fire. I kid you not. So it's a struggle to hold on to what they know as they venture into this unknown of living in America and not having the village. The village is now gone, and they now have to figure it out. And that vulnerability of not knowing what to do and not having anyone to call on can either make them more strict or completely like, I know business, I'm going to do like Angelique and boyfriend, you take care of you type thing.
Right.
I love it.
I had a question for Dionne.
In the book too, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I had a question for Dionne. Just about what you wanted people to get from the book. I don't know. Some authors have, a main theme or idea they want to get across. Some authors just, whatever you take from it, you take from it. I found that for me reading it, I just felt like, I really don't want to live a life of regret like a lot of these characters did. So, say what you want to say when you want to say it. When you're thinking of someone, get in touch with them, and especially with your kids, how to how to try and bond with them and relate to them, as well as kind of keeping them in touch with their Caribbean culture. So I don't know, is there one main thing you wanted people to take away from this to kind of not turn out the way, some of the characters did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you really hit on those points. I always encourage people, you have one life, so you have to live it. You have to live the life that you want. You cannot live with regrets, and you don't want to look back and say, "I wish I did that," or "I wish I did this." In terms of the relationships with the mothers and the daughters, and I talked earlier about keeping the curtains closed and not communicating, and I've heard so many stories about I really never really knew my grandmother, I never really knew my mother, and I just think it's so important for us to, even respecting with being able to respect those boundaries, to be able to communicate and to be able to, show, especially your daughters, affection, because boys always get it, but girls don't. And you may look up one day and you've lost that someone and you hadn't told them that you love them. Even with my dad, he's never the type to tell you that he loves you. He loves you, but he'll never tell you that. So I'll keep saying it, even though he doesn't respond on the phone. I'll say, "I love you, Dad," before I hang up, and he says, "Okay, bye."
My dad says, "Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-huh."
But I'm going to let him know. I'm going to let him know, even if he's not comfortable saying it, I'm going to let him know. And he has said it a couple times. He said it more often now. He does, but it's just something that he never grew up saying, and I'm sure his parents never said it to him. So, but I would never want him to ever question whether whether I did love him or not. My mom says it all the time now. My dad's still challenged by it.
I think you did a great job in weaving the story and really bringing to life things that are real. From from the parent leaving the West Indies to go abroad for a better life, and the grandparent taking care of the children, like that's real, right? To the Mako that lives down the street that does everybody's business, that's real too. I wanted to know, how long did it take you to write this book?
It took me a little over 2.5 years. It was a long process, and the first part was really difficult for me because, interestingly enough, so I did a lot of legal writing, and you're just stuck within these parameters. The law is what it is, the facts are what they are. So you try to weave the story so that it's favorable for your client, but you can't go too far outside the lane. And so I thought fiction writing would be just the most easy thing in the world because there were no boundaries. But it turns out, because there were no boundaries, it was difficult because I always wanted to get it right. And when you have these boundaries, you know where it is, how to get it right, and where it's off. With fiction, you're thinking, well, should I do this? Should I do that with the character? Should I start it this way? Should I start the chapter this way? What about this scene? Do I really need this scene? And so the first 20,000 words, I actually got stuck. I just kept going back and editing, and I didn't know how to move the story forward. So I did get stuck, and I ended up going to a writing conference and then getting unstuck when I had talked to a few people, and they said, just write it. It's not going to be wrong. You can fix it later on, but just write it. And so that's why it's, that's part of the reason why it took me so long. It was getting unstuck and then just finding that time to do it.
Did you just start writing? Did you just get up and start writing, or did you take a class, or did you, a workshop? You mentioned the conference, or did you follow the rules and regulations, whatever they are, of writing, or you just got up and was I'm doing this?
I started off with a couple of short stories, And then I said, I did the short stories and sent them out to a few people to see what they thought. And when I got some positive feedback, I said, okay, I'm just gonna launch into the novel. What I do differently now that I didn't do with this first book was that because I always had to outline with legal briefs and stuff, I said, I'm not outlining this, I'm just going. Because wherever it takes me, it's going. And so I just know I got 3 characters, 3 generations, and I'm going with it. So I tried it that way, and I've tried it with the outlining. The outlining goes a little bit quicker, but you know, I feel free to go outside my lane, and so I go off the road all the time on on whatever I'm writing, because I just like having that freedom.
Can you talk a little bit about the experience publishing? I mean, how, getting the book once you finished the manuscript and I guess had it edited, and how, what was the next step for you? How did you get it to where we have it in our hands?
Well, that's where the writing conference really came in handy. It was there were so many authors there that decided that they were going to self-publish. Some of them had done the traditional publishing and decided, it's really easy to self-publish. You don't have to, go through a bunch of rejection letters. You don't have to try to hunt down a literary agent and then have them hunt down a publisher, and then 2-3 years later your book comes out with some cover that you cannot stand looking at. So I met a lot of great people at the conference. Writers are, I think, some of the most encouraging people out there. They'll share everything with you. And so I met editors, I met people that did book cover designs, I met typesetters, and from there it was just easy to put it together. And it took me a while to find a cover designer, because I'm very picky. I wanted it to be a book that I would pull off the shelf if I was looking. And so it took me a while, but I found a couple of books that I liked and figured out who the cover designer was and hired her. And now I had the book that I love. I love looking at the cover, and so the publishing piece was easy, actually, once I got the hang of it.
So my question has to do with this dual career that you now have, and from my experience in the legal industry, we tend to be very conservative, and so I imagine the firm you're working with, they're very supportive of this writing career, because for me and Carry On Friends, I limit myself in what I'm able to do, because in my head, well, now I don't work at a firm, but in my head I'm thinking the firm is not going to like this, they might have concerns, is it going to associate with her blog with my firm? So tell me a little bit about this dual career that you now have and how you're managing it, or how any ideas or tips you have in that regard.
Yeah, that was one of the difficult pieces. Was you've gone along this career path, and everyone sees you as this. Everyone sees me as a lawyer, and sharing with colleagues that I'm actually writing a book. I wrote a book. I'm publishing a book. Was really, I didn't know how they would react to it. I didn't know how the partner of the firm would react to it. Didn't know how my colleagues would react to it. But the surprising thing is, I didn't know what it is about lawyers, but they all want to write stories, and probably because they have a lot of material to work with. But when I started, I told 1 or 2 people, and they're like, really, I started writing something, and I put it down, and someone else said, I really want to write, and I told my managing partner at the time. He goes, well, I wrote a couple of short stories in my day. And there was one partner that I worked with that was, he was actually a theater major, and when he graduated, he said, well, his parents were like, well, where are you going to make your money from? You're not going to make it out of, in the theater. So he figured he would go to law school because then he could still act up, but just, in a courtroom as opposed to on the stage.
Oh, Lord.
So it was actually fun to learn about my colleagues and what their secret desires really were. So they were very supportive. I went back to Minneapolis and did a book signing, and I wasn't expecting this, but my partner, the managing partner, showed up and paid for everything afterwards, and was not
Wow.
expecting him to do that, but yeah,
That's
so it was
very
really
supportive.
Wow.
Girl.
yeah.
Anybody want to support me that way? I'm here.
Yes.
Gift cards, cash. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so it's been really good. I think there's a lot of people who have creative interests, but go through for those traditional careers, but then you don't want to live a life with regrets. You gotta let it come out.
In terms of traditional careers, especially for Caribbean people, those are some of the challenges that I have as a not a parent coordinator. I'm the president of my daughter's PA.
Mm-hmm.
It's that unknown. Again, back to that unknown. Doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Basically,
Yes.
those are sure, and anything else that they're not sure. How are you going to make money if they can't see how you can make money? Then
Right.
Don't do that. So I think and again, a theme in your book. It was just how are you supposed to make money? She only wanted to become a nurse or what because someone else said that was a good job, and in that way she wanted to please her mother and go a step above that, because that's what she thought her mother expected. But yeah, island folks, we want to do what we know for sure and what's legit, and anything.
Carrie, did she really want to become a nurse, or did she feel pressured because the mother told her about someone in the community?
Exactly. And she wanted to impress her mother and go a step above, by doing well.
And remember, back in those days, those were the easy jobs to get as an immigrant.
Yeah.
Nurse.
I want to know, is Mr. Chambers the father of the maid's son?
Oh my God!
I hope so, because that white is.
They are moving along their own storylines. This is something else.
I hope not.
I peeped that. I was watching that. So another character was Dahlia, and
that last thing she dropped at the end, I was like, what?
You were able to weave a lot of the issues that affect Caribbean women, but women on a whole. And in Dahlia's, in her storyline, it was really self-love, as it is with Carmen's, but from a different perspective. Loving a man that really don't love you, going above and beyond, and he's not treating you right, but because you want companionship, and you want a warm body, you're willing to go to those depths, those real low parts of who you are, to go and cook ackee and stuff and give him a red stripe beard. So was that intentional? Like, you wanted to highlight that? Or was that part of your writing as you go along?
It was part of the writing as I was going along, but I actually had a friend that was kind of going through a similar situation. It was so frustrating to see, she was doing laundry and ironing shirts for people, and I said, what is he doing for you? But, you can't really say anything because she loves them like cook food, so. But yeah, and there was a time where they weren't speaking and he'd done something awful, and then she walked out with the shirts that she'd ironed, and I was like, well, I'm out. can't believe you ironed his shirts for him. So, but I think I was writing about that time in Angelique's life at when that was going on. I said, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting little twist to throw in there.
I just loved a lot of things. There were so many things um, that just set up like, wow, this is real life. You know, Angelique goes to have dinner with Dahlia and sees the child in the picture, and you know, she says, "Oh, I'm getting my child in a couple months." You know, and I want to be like, mm-hmm. So you think? You know, but those are the sad stories, and you know, this goes back to something I talked to Alicia about last year at the play. You know, how much we sacrifice in we have deferred dreams, and we also sacrifice because as a mother, you know, you have the responsibilities of your child, and so you feel there's this hole, and you feel vulnerable that people are judging you because you've left your child in another country, yet you're here taking care of a man and, you know, putting off the hydro bill all much time. I'm like, what? You know, so, you know, that's what really I connected with, just the real stories in there. Because, you know, we all know somebody who's been through it or did something like that, or, you know, feeling shame that you had to leave your kids longer than you planned and trying to push through and just drum up the money same way so you can get the kids to come here. You know, so I really love that about it. Any other I know the story was featured or focused around the women, but I still coming back to the men. There has to be something that you know, I just feel Byron and even the brother.
People are loving them some Byron.
Byron, you think I said no man leave you, so don't take care.
Byron was for the other man.
Oh my goodness.
Angelique's baby daddy. What was his name again? Carmen, what's Angelique's dad's name again?
I can't remember.
Angelique,
her husband.
Oh, Clifton.
Clifton.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and his parents.
The Chambers.
So we've got like a total of like 5 minutes left. So can each one of you go down, just go down take turns and tell a person who is thinking about reading this book, who has the book on the shelf and hasn't opened it yet, someone who's looking for a gift for somebody else. Tell us one sentence about what really impressed you about this book.
Okay, I'll start.
Yeah.
For me, I love the book because it will resonate with any woman, whether you're from the Caribbean or not, because the issues that the women face in the story are real issues about love, about heartache. We all want to be loved. We all have a sense of belonging, and we all need a good story that kind of takes us where and says things we don't necessarily want to talk about, but it takes you there. And this book does that. It takes you to a place where you know it exists, whether it's good or bad, if you want to laugh, if you want to cry, all of that's here. So it's better than a good show because it's like you can pick it up and it just keeps you interested. So I would say, you know, if you're looking for something that will keep you interested, keep you glued, and it'll make you feel good after it's over. I mean, yeah, there are some tragic moments, but in the end, you have hope. And that's the best part about the book to me.
Thank you.
I've been selling this book for you, and one thing I made sure to just impart is that it's a really deep book, and that's being concise. But it's a deep book with storylines that you can relate to because the universal themes come down to love and forgiveness and self-love and family. And these are stories that we can all relate to and connect with, and characters we can all cry with or hurt for or shake up. Yes, this is a deep book.
Thank you.
I'd say read this book and come away with the opportunity. You'll come away with the opportunity to make better of your relationships. It's fun, but it also gives you the perspective in a way that will only increase or benefit your relationships. I think that's what the biggest thing I got from this book.
I would say that I'd say that you're gonna love reading this book because of the characters. I think the characters are so strong and they draw you in, and you just want to find out what's gonna happen with them. And then also I think it's great for people with a Caribbean background, but also for people who don't have a lot of knowledge about the Caribbean, growing up in the Caribbean and the history there, so they can learn something from it, and without feeling alienated or without feeling like they don't, they don't get it. The way that it's written, it draws you in, and so it helps to understand those different cultures. But I just think that the characters, they're like people that you know, and that's why I loved reading it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would highlight again, I think what Tabali, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly, but, we talked a lot about immigrant women and about Jamaican women and Caribbean women, but really and truly, this story is a woman's story because, we all, wherever we come from, we tend to make a lot of sacrifices. I mean, that's a generalization, but, we do tend to sacrifice a lot for our children. We defer our dreams, and this is the story of the woman in this book, and but apart in addition to that, it's humorous, and it's interesting, and it takes you on a journey that you'll enjoy and that you'll come away with a lot to think about, and probably looking out for the sequel.
Thank you.
Well, I love the book because it kind of zooms you into each character's story, but then because it crosses generations, zooms you out and gives you a larger overview and you can see the way behaviors and traditions are passed down, willingly or not, if you meant to do it or not, and the similarity between generations, where the younger usually is like, well, this lady has no clue what I'm doing or how I'm living, she doesn't understand me, but she really does. She's been there, she has done that, and she knows exactly what you're going through, but because of the generational clash, she's not really able to express it in a way that would be easily taken in by the younger generation. That's really what I love mostly about the book. I could zoom into individual characters, but then zoom out and see the larger overarching plot lines and themes that cross the generations, and that's really what helped me reflect on my own life. I really started thinking about my mother in this book, and my grandmother and how we relate, and I'm like, even though I'm old enough to know, yeah, of course she's been there, done that. She knows exactly what I'm going through in these different. I'm still her child, and like, oh, this lady has no idea. But this book helped me to realize, yeah, she does, and probably more than I even realized, because she's not telling me the whole story, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think this book is. I would recommend this book. It gives you a deeper insight into women's lives and how we do and don't share, and helps you reflect back on how you can and share more with your family.
Thank you.
So do you have any last words for us and for the viewers on what to expect from the well, I know everybody who's been watching or who's going to watch later, because Scandal is on. Let's all be real about it.
Totally forgot about that.
I totally forgot about that.
Because that's how good this book is right now, because people have just put off Scandal for this. But can you give us some final thoughts for what people should expect when they open the book?
You're going to experience a different, life in a different culture in a different time. But you're also going to, as many of you have said, relate to the characters because they're issues that everyone goes through. So you're going to have the sights and sounds and aromas and tastes of Jamaica and then what's going to feel like to be out in the cold, but also what it is to examine lives and see the similarities to your life and your family situations. And I think it was a really fun read. Well, it was fun writing it, so I hope it was a fun read. But I think it will give you insight into your own relationships and maybe some understanding about your parents or your children.
Yeah. Deep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you. I had so much fun.
Yay!
Waiting for the sequel.
Yes.
Kevin, start working on it.
We are very, we're tough on our authors now. We're like, okay, you put out one. It's the Caribbean Women. You know how we do. You did one, but I mean,
Yes. We need one more.
2017.
We're gonna need right. We're gonna be looking at you
more.
So.
Are you real?
All right. Well, we're ready. We are ready.
Awesome.
Listen, we need to everybody this to film. We need to get this on film.
And where can we get the book?
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, I'm still stuck on the film idea. I'm sorry. It's available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. And if you're in Canada, you can get it on Kobo as ebook.
Okay, great.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And,
Thank you.
If you would like any of us to be in the movie, please let us know. You have our Twitter handles. We're here for you.
Do it.
And thank you, Eva, for putting this Google Hangout together.
Yes.
You are awesome, woman.
Yes.
Well, you know, Miss J has to bring books to our attention on Facebook. So and Alicia, the book came up like 3 times. I was like, wait a minute. I guess we have to read this now. But
and Carol.
But thanks so much,
definitely.
everyone, and thanks for the selfies. Everybody was so cute.
Yes, I loved it.
So hopefully we will get to talk to you again soon. Please keep us posted on Twitter. You have all of our Twitter handles whenever you have something going on so that we can share it.
Okay.
And thanks again. Everybody have a good night. Enjoy Scandal in your DVR. Some things we just can't let go. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.